Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sinead Says Podcast. Hope you're all doing well today. This week we have Conor Creighton on. He is the author of the book The Truth About Love. I read it recently and I was like, I have to get him on. He's amazing. So he's a meditation teacher from Ireland. And in the book he talks about it's a modern manifesto and spiritual guide to relationships. I was like, this is such a bit of me, and I loved reading it, and I felt like I had so much inspiration after reading it, and was so happy to have him on. Before we go on, let's just big thank you to our sponsors, BetterHelp. BetterHelp is an online counselling platform where you can text and Zoom call, anything you want to do with your therapist, they are there. The app is so accessible, it's so amazing. There is loads of groupinars where you can even go in there, and sometimes if you're an avoidant attachment or anything, you can go in and listen to tips for that. It's really accessible, and obviously therapy, I vouch for it so much, so it's amazing to be sponsored by a therapy platform. So if you want 10% off your first month, that is betterhelp.com/Sinead, betterhelp.com/Sinead. So hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sinead Says Podcast. I have a very interesting guest on today, Conor Creighton. That's right, isn't it? Creighton?
Almost.
Oh, you just told me as well. I was like, make sure it's right. Conor Creighton.
Conor Creighton is perfect, Sinead.
Okay, right. Okay. And so whenever his team came to my team, he was a meditation teacher talking about relationships and true love and self-love. I was like, oh my God, how do I not know this person? And I thought he was from Dublin, but he just told me he's from the north as well. So I was like, I have to read his book. So I read his book and messaged my team, and I was like, oh my God, we need to get him on. We need to hear his voice and get the male perspective, because the book is called The Truth About Love. And you're so vulnerable in it as well, because you talk about all your failed relationships, which we've got something in common there as well, because I too had like a lot of relationships as well. And I talk a lot about relationships. And I'm like, yeah, I know I had a lot of failed relationships, and that I learned a lot from all of them. But firstly, tell us the inspiration for the book, your journey to the truth of love, and how you got there with the perspective that you have now.
Yeah, well, I think at one level, like, becoming a meditation teacher was an act of love towards myself, first off. So I kind of feel like everything that I'm doing, and even writing books and so on, is all sort of part of my homework of learning to love myself. And the thing that kind of inspired me to write the book is that I do an awful lot of one-on-ones with people. I just work with people and kind of do sort of spiritual mentoring and work with couples as well. And the thing that just kept on coming up was the amount of resistance people had to just loving themselves. The amount of negativity and self-loathing they were carrying inside their kind of the language in their thoughts, and just their reactions to themselves. So it became very, very clear to me, like, having taught meditation for all this time, I was like, well, okay, meditation is wonderful. Like, you get presence, you get focus, you get awareness. But now let's like really work on loving ourselves and being very proactive with trying to love ourselves and trying to understand then what loving yourself is. I think an awful lot of us have this misconception that to love yourself means to have a bubble bath, you know what I mean? And to and eat a bar of chocolate or something. But loving yourself is actually just setting boundaries. It's sort of saying no to some of the kind of the energy vampires in your life. And it's maybe permitting yourself to live your dreams. And that's really the thing that I wanted to get across in the book.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And it's mad as well, because when you when I describe meditation as well, it's actually, when you first start meditating, it's so hard to sit down for 10 to 15 minutes a day. But the feeling you get from making yourself do something hard and putting a boundary in and giving yourself discipline carries on throughout the day for me. Like, it's not just about the 15 minutes. Like, I'm proud of myself. I can feel my hormones. I can feel my happiness increasing. So it takes with me throughout the day, because if the actual act of meditating when you first begin it's not very nice, is it? It's not like a nice place to be.
Yeah, and as you know as well as I do, the reason it's not nice is because we are addicted to distraction.
Mm-hmm.
The reason we're addicted to distraction is because it's so painful to just be with ourselves. This is why, like, on Sunday evenings, they talk about, like, on dating apps, how there's always like a surge in activity on a Sunday evening, because it's the one evening, it's the one time of the week when perhaps singles are mostly alone and they're by themselves and they're feeling pain. They're feeling like an emotional discomfort. And so the dating apps experience this huge kind of activity on them.
I always say this about dating apps as well. Whenever you are going on dates and then you get rejected, you fill the void with just going on it again and then trying to get a like, because it gives you validation from them. But as what you talked about in the book, like, it's about removing yourself from wanting to be loved by others. Yeah, it's okay to want to be liked by others, but the most important is how you feel about yourself and your relationship with yourself. So how would you describe or guide people on this path of beginning to stop looking outward for love and start looking inward?
Yeah, I think the first step is just to become really, really aware of it, and just to
Yeah.
recognize, oh, I am full of emotional holes and I'm looking for other people to plug them. Like the whole reason that we find other people attractive is because they validate us in a way that we're not able to do ourselves. Like, that's the whole kind of romantic love is all about, that someone's coming along and telling you that you look good. This shouldn't be news to you. You should be like, yeah, I know. I look at myself. Yeah, I look at myself in the mirror and I'm so proud. It doesn't matter. I didn't choose this body, but I'm doing the best I can with it. So people come along and they say things like, you're so interesting. And we float off the ground. It could be, imagine how it would be if rather than looking for people to compliment us, to fill our empty holes, that we somehow were able to satisfy ourselves, and then all our relationships would just be these celebrations of how satisfied we are. Now, I know that's a very aspirational thing to say, but it is also possible. If you can recognize, this is where I am trying to consume something, it's where I'm trying to take a shortcut to self-love by just outsourcing it to another person, which is what we do all the time, this idea of, like, I can't live if living is without you, sort of thing. But can we learn to actually, hey, I'm going to try and generate this love inside myself. I'm going to try and soothe myself. I'm going to try and compliment myself and celebrate myself.
I think that's one of my main missions as well, because
Yeah.
I talk about relationships. I wrote a book on relationships as well, and I get a lot of messages, even through the podcast, of girls wanting advice, and young girls, that's the words that they say: I can't go on without him. And personally, that was also me. I felt like I couldn't go on. I wasn't enough. And then I felt, once I got that love from me, it was my mission then to help others. But it's not an easy path. And people think it is affirmations and bubble baths. But one of the things you talked about that really stood out to me was the fact that shame is blocking our self-love. It is literally like the block in our arteries. And that is a big reason why I gained self-love, because I went through shame and looked at the way I was before, like things that you feel shame for that make you feel like a bad person. But when you actually look deeply at shame, it's usually because you're just an insecure little girl or boy and you wanted to be validated and you wanted to be accepted. So the things that you did that made you feel shame, you can just, like, that's what I got from your book as well, that you can just look at them, the things that made you feel shame, and you can have compassion for yourself. And it's almost like the shame melts away when you just see yourself as, insecure and looking for love.
Yeah. And Sinead, if we even, like, I think it's so good to bring this sense of, like, examination and skepticism, everything that we feel, especially with regards to shame. So if we look at shame, almost all the time, it's never our fault. You're ashamed because you grew up in a certain part of the city. You're ashamed because you looked a certain way. You're ashamed because maybe, like, your daddy was a drunk. You're ashamed because of something that happened that wasn't related to you. And all of this shame is quite often like moments when you're a kid, and it's really not your responsibility and it's not your fault. And when we begin to examine shame, I think we can realize that it's actually just an illusion. It's like this big monster at the end of the bed. And it's so wonderful. And this is why people really enjoy relationships too, because relationships are one of these sort of sacred places where people can share the things they're ashamed about and feel seen. And I think it would be wonderful if we could begin to sort of share our shame with just our friends, our communities, and, talk about some of the things. Like, I think especially like a big thing is like around sex, and it's often so difficult, especially like kind of talking for men here, men kind of quite often approach sex with this idea that we have to be so confident, we have to be so decisive, we have to know everything. We have to know everything about a woman's body or our partner's body before they even tell us, this idea. And quite often, or a lot of the time, men are kind of like so insecure because there's so much shame about how they are doing sexually as well. And I think if we could just get to this sort of place of sort of recognizing that by sharing our shame, it instantly connects us. It instantly creates a kind of an intimacy and a safety and a bond. And it's so important. I think shame can be really useful in that regard in romantic relationships.
From working one-to-one, what is the biggest blockage for this love? And if it's shame, what kind of shame is it?
Yeah, it's the feeling that we're not worthy.
Yeah.
There's just this feeling that we are not worthy. And we're not worthy by design. Like, nobody escapes childhood feeling like, I belong in this world. I'm a beautiful person. I deserve love. Nobody really escapes that way. I think there'd be no point in being a human if you already started off that way. Like, the whole purpose is we need this friction. This is what we work with in our life. Our trauma is kind of, our trauma gives us our purpose. So we come out of our childhood with this feeling that we're not really worthy. We don't really belong. We kind of have this low value to us. That's why there's so much narcissism in the world. And our path is really to just learn to accept ourselves and learn to love ourselves. And the big thing, the big blockage that I come across with clients all the time is they just don't think they have the permission to love themselves. They think that they can only love themselves once they've achieved certain things, once they've reached this sort of perfect space. Like, they think as they are right now, they're unlovable, which is so it's so sad and it's so wrong. We're all entirely lovable just as we are.
Yeah, and I notice that in certain people, because obviously there's different types of the validation you're searching. Sometimes it's in relationships and sometimes it's in your accomplishments. And I noticed that so much. Like, we were chatting about this with my roommate, and she's so successful. She's 24. She's turned 24 and she's so successful. I've never met a woman who has so much under her belt. Like, she just wrote a book. Like it's insane. And she's always feeling guilty when she's not doing something that's making her, productive. And like, she's always trying to like justify to me. She's like, oh, and I'm like, you can chill out today, you can relax. And I says, and we spoke about it, and I was like, especially with feeling loved, and it comes down to like how your parents, like when they praised you a lot, and they probably praised her a lot whenever, she had certain, achievements and goals. But I think mine was always like relationships and friends that I got my validation from and being like the funny one, but hers was that. And then I don't know, do you watch the Formula One?
I love Formula One.
Okay, right. So I love Formula One, right? And I've just came back
you
from
actually at Silverstone.
Yeah, I was at Silverstone there. It was amazing, obsessed. And when I put up and I'll look, I like Max. And people are like, why do you like Max? Max is a brat. All right. So I have to go searching for why Max is a brat, because I need to find out. I need to go to his defense in some way. So I listened to this clip of him. I think it was like in a podcast or a radio show. And he talked about, so obviously his dad, trained him, and they raced together. So when he was training or whatever, he made like a move that was a wee bit selfish on his part. Like, he wanted to get in front of the other person because he was coming second, and he probably shouldn't have made that move. And he made the move and he didn't win. And his dad left him at the track, got the stuff, got into a van, and just left him at the track because he was so disappointed and so annoyed that he didn't win. Now, this is at a very young age. So this is what I say to people. I'm like, you could look at someone being a brat. He got validated and loved when he won. So that is why he is so determined to win. Because if he doesn't win, he's going to be left at the track.
Yeah. And there's an even more interesting kind of addition to that story, Sinead. It's like Max Verstappen's dad was never a Formula One champion.
Okay.
Max Verstappen's dad was also a racer, but he didn't do that well. So again, here you have an example of a parent, a frustrated parent, projecting their desires and wants onto their child and forgetting that their child is an individual who perhaps doesn't want any of these things. I could imagine Max Verstappen is an incredibly tormented young man.
Same, yeah. Yeah. And that's why I was like, I need to jump to his defense, because people who are at the top there, and when I listen to that story of him being, as a child, being left at a race course, can you imagine how much you would have felt not enough and not worthy? So he never felt worthy unless he was winning. So like, no wonder he's pulling out all the moves and being so ignorant on the track. Do you know what I mean? So it's nice to come to his defense with some compassion. But
very true.
Yeah, you know, because people were calling him a brat and they're so annoyed at the way he's racing. But I'm just like, he's racing like that because he's not going to feel love, and that, like, you know what I mean? So Max, if you're listening to this, like, you're not, it's okay.
Talk about Formula One for the rest of the podcast.
I know. Well, hold on. Who's your favorite? Who's your favorite?
I mean, of course, I love Lewis just because I love the whole story, and it's like the fact, like, do you know, and I love his dad, and I love that whole relationship. And but then I kind of like, I really like Lando Norris as well.
Yeah, I like Lando. He's funny.
Yeah, and Alex Albon, I like him a lot too.
Alex Albon meditates.
Yes, because his family's Buddhist.
Yeah, so he meditates and visualizes. So I loved him when I first got into it. I was like, oh my God, him. So love him, yeah. But I like Carlos Sainz as well. He's my favorite.
Yes, yeah.
And he did so well at the weekend. So I went for him. I was like rooting for him before, and I was like, yes, he won. But yeah, Formula One, guys. Good podcast for Formula One.
Love the audience.
No, everyone's into it now because Drive to Survive.
True.
Yeah, it's a thing. Okay, so back to self-love, back to the book. I've got the book here. So I think the hardest thing when it comes to self-love is you tell people, okay, this is how you do self-love, but then there's no clear path or something. It's very hard to show people the way. Like, I feel like it took me so long, and it's still something that I work on every single day. I still have to have complete compassion for myself. So how can we use meditation to gain self-love? Or
so I think it is actually, it's really simple to describe. It just requires a huge amount of discipline, and so basically self-love is only doing what you want to do. I think it's as simple as that. Now, that doesn't mean that you're being selfish. It just means you're checking in with yourself and going like, do I really want this? So many of us have these coping strategies that are running through our systems. You know, the people pleaser, the person who always smiles, the person who always says yes. And so often we find ourselves, especially in relationships, that you're just kind of automatically reacting to your partner rather than really checking in and going like, hold on, do I actually want to go to this party tonight? Do I want to go away this weekend? Do I want to have sex now? You know, all of these things. So self-love is really developing the capacity, and this is where meditation helps, because meditation is just like this phenomenal technique for getting really clear with what's going on inside you. And you just get it. So self-love is really getting clear about what you want and then honoring what you want. And the more you honor what you want, the more you're able to, like, I know for me, right, I grew up in a fairly chaotic family, right? So a classic situation where I was kind of acting like an adult from age 4, right? So in those situations, like when you've grown up in those sort of families, you tend to not really have boundaries, and you tend to not be able to prioritize yourself. So every relationship that I would go into, I would just find myself like helping so much, caring so much, taking care, and getting to this point where I would be really exhausted and just like, oh my God, I need space. And it was simply because I didn't know how to set a boundary. I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know that it was okay to do what I wanted. It was okay to be authentic. So self-love is really about like being very, very authentic. Is this actually what I want? And self-love is also, and this is particularly hard for Irish people, I think, self-love is also being okay with somebody maybe not liking you.
Yeah.
That's a huge one. I think us Irish people, like it feels like a life or death thing if somebody doesn't like us.
Yeah. I feel like I got that, like, I had to find a way to like myself, because obviously in the industry that I'm in, you get so much negativity and so much trolls. And, the
Yeah.
first few times where you get a negative troll attack, you're so hurt. Like, you can't get out of bed.
Really?
It's so bad. And then you have to build the resilience and know that
Yeah.
as well. Some people don't understand your way of thinking. Some people don't believe in change. I think that's one of the biggest reasons for negativity, is that, say me as a young kid, like, would have been drinking and out partying and like being crazy, and and my emotions were in control of me. So if somebody's seen that side and then now sees that side, they're like, well, she was like this years ago, and I used to be like, oh well, no, I'm not, I'm so changed. But now I'm just like, you know what, the people that don't believe I've changed are the people that haven't changed, and don't believe that it's like capable in that moment in their life. So you have to like step back, understand their behavior. And yeah, I think I had no choice whether to, I had to have some thick skin in the
Yeah.
industry. Yeah.
And Sinead too, do you know what I mean? There's something, I think I heard this lovely piece of advice the other day, and I think it really, really resonates. And it's like, you shouldn't care about the opinion of people who don't know you.
Mm-hmm.
Only care about the opinion of those who really know you. If your friends are giving you some like feedback about how you are, then that's really important. But if it's some sort of stranger or someone from your past on the internet,
Yeah.
they don't know you. They're acting out their own trauma,
Yeah.
you know?
So in terms of, you said there about your relationships, and you went through them and you became, exhausted, and you had a bit of a burnout because you had no boundaries. When
Yeah.
did you start beginning the process of setting boundaries and becoming into the healthy version of yourself? And like, how is it different from being in the past relationships?
Last month.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's sort of like there's a really interesting thing, and you probably recognize this too. Like I think you were talking about having a colorful past as well. You know, progress isn't linear. It's like a big spiral, and you kind of revisit things again, and you revisit them again. And I've noticed that kind of over the years, like yes, my capacity to set a boundary is becoming better and becoming better, but there's still loads of moments where I get like trampled all over in life. But it's sort of now, at least I kind of recognize when I get trampled that I'm like, oh, it's not because that person is bad necessarily. That's actually kind of my fault. I never said no at the right time, you know? And whereas in the past I would get, I would kind of, I constantly thought that, oh no, there's just bullies everywhere, bullies. I'm being, these people are dominating me. And then I began to realize that, well, they're only dominating me because I'm kind of letting them. It's in so many cases, and I really kind of, I hope I'm saying this as sensitively as possible for people who are maybe stuck in some sort of abusive situations and that. But in many situations, we'll discover that the reason we're not being treated well is because we're not saying no. We're not saying no to that bad treatment. A big part of my sort of discovery of this was just sort of starting to spend more time doing things for me. You know, just learning to live a fulfilling, wholehearted life outside of a relationship. Also, really learning to become more vulnerable, you know, and kind of rebuild like a lot of masculine friendships. You know, I started to sort of work a lot doing men's groups and things like this and running men's circles. Because before that, I think I'd always sort of looked to like girlfriends as my emotional support systems. So I was like, okay, I need to like get good men into my life. And so I'd start to like run men's groups where we'd come along and we'd all just talk about our feelings and things like this. And we'd share together. And I'd come away from these groups going like, this is wonderful. I feel love. I feel connection here. And by doing all these things, it slowly has made like the relationships that I'm in much better,
Yeah,
much.
because you don't rely on them for your full happiness, I suppose.
Yeah, and also kind of it's more this sense, you know what I mean? This is the thing with shame too, Sinead. Shame makes us feel that we're bad. I, for a very long time, felt that there was something bad with me, like there was something wrong with me.
Mm.
And the more we can connect, the more we can use our shame and talk about our shame, the more kind of people will go, oh, fuck, I feel the same way. And immediately, like a cloud lifts. When someone says, oh, yeah, that happens to me every time too. And you're like, really? Wow, okay, it's not so bad then. And when this happens, you begin to kind of recognize that you're not actually bad. You're kind of a good person. We're all essentially really, really good people. But very few of us trust that in ourselves because of the weight of shame. And all this connection and all this sharing helps to lift that shame. And then when you feel your inner goodness, you just treat yourself so much better in relationship. You won't stand for any bullshit if you feel you're good.
Yeah. And like I always see that with, people who message me on Instagram and they're talking about, Sinead, this guy is treating me this way and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, okay, what way is he treating you? And then what do you deserve? Like you're not, it's this lack of self-love that they're putting up
Yeah.
with this stuff. And it's so bizarre to me because maybe I would have put up with it years ago, but it's mad that some of the things that these girls are telling me that these boys are doing, like going out for days, lying to them so bad. It's crazy to me, like because now I value myself and I love myself, I feel like I would be like, I wouldn't even be there. I'd be like, this is way past my boundaries. I don't know. What do you think of having you put up one boundary and then like, because some people, I'm like, you put the boundary up, you tell them what you want, because a lot of people don't actually tell their partners or their friends what they want. So how can they know what to do if they don't give them the boundary? So because first of all, men definitely aren't mind readers. They do not know what you want, and also very different energies there. It's mad when I do polls on Instagram of what men want and what girls want, what they need from relationships, and it's like polar opposite. So just because you need and want something doesn't mean that that's exactly what they need and want, and it doesn't mean that they actually know either. They don't have a clue what you want. So when you put it up and be like, okay, you know what, I want this as a boundary, I want this behavior, but they do it again and they just keep doing it. Where's the line? Like,
Well, I think it begins with sort of what value you're placing on yourself.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so, so important because somebody will only value you as much as you value yourself. And when you realize, like a boundary's been crossed or you've been lied to, that's kind of it, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
You like you just
For me, yeah.
you deserve better than that, right?
Yeah.
You totally deserve better than that, and sort of a firm no in those moments. Also recognizing that kind of, I mean, when it comes to what people want, there's such double standards, between men and women, and men quite often will take the piss unless they're confronted with a boundary, unless they're met with some sort of look, this is what I want, this is the value that I'm placing on myself, and this is what I won't accept.
And do you think, how we feel about ourselves is mirrored in the people that we're attracted to? Do you think, how we think about ourselves, we attract that person of how highly we think of ourselves?
Yeah, totally. Like Sinead, I think it's quite funny. Like I grew up really poor, and so I always felt very ashamed of that. And then there again, like that's shame. It had nothing to do with me. It wasn't like I was the breadwinner in the house, but I still feel ashamed of it. And so for many years would almost look for like quite wealthy girls,
Oh,
as a way of just sort of kind of validating my existence, because my whole thing was like, I'm from this poor little family, but if I can go out with someone who's really wealthy, then it means that's all disappeared. But of course, what would happen is that sort of somebody from a wealthy family could never empathize with what I'd experienced. So I would often feel quite isolated in the relationship. It was just, here's a rich person who doesn't know what it's like to be poor. And I kind of felt like they don't understand me. So quite often we'll do this in relationships. Like the people we choose are pointing out the shadow side of ourselves. They're pointing out the aspects of ourselves that really need to be healed. If we're constantly finding, if we're constantly finding people who don't treat us well, then that links directly right back to our impression of ourselves. If you love yourself, if you really love yourself, it is impossible to be in an abusive relationship. It just will not come into your radar. It won't even be attracted to you. Like, it's very interesting. You know, like couples generally meet because they both have different kind of programs that enable each other. An extrovert will encounter an introvert. Someone who's very kind of avoidant will find someone who is very needy, and so on and so forth. And these programs come together to aggravate each other, and kind of not as a form of torture, but to show you the parts of yourself that need work. Like, this is the whole point of a relationship. A relationship is like one of those blue lights on a mattress in a hotel that show all the kind of germs and on the sheets. Yeah. That's what the relationship does. It'll show you like, oh, this is where you're lacking. And as you work on yourself, the more you work on yourself, the less stark the encounters become, and eventually you can get to a stage where you're meeting someone who your differences are kind of workable.
Yeah, I think
but intrinsically they'll treat you well.
Yeah, and I always think, say if like me and my partner ever broke up, I'm like, I would never even say it was a failure. I'd say it was like the most successful relationship ever, because I learned so much in that relationship. And it's not because like he taught me these things, it's because everything was coming up, and I became so aware of all my pain and all this stuff. And when it came up, I was like, okay, this is my opportunity to heal. And I just grew so much in this relationship. And even the relationship before that, without the relationship before my partner and I feel like I wouldn't be with my partner now, because he was very secure, and he also taught me that I can be whoever I want, I can do whatever I want, because if anyone was telling me what to do or where to be, I was like, I'm out of here, like I'm freedom all the way. So it would be my excuse to run. And then it taught me that like if I lean in and I'm with a secure person, like it's not that scary. So then like the next relationship as well was just like, so yeah, I suppose you do learn. And I think that is a good thing to do as well. Like sit down and ask yourself what you learned in each relationship in your journal. And do you journal?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. How long have you been meditating for, and like in this industry?
I think I've been meditating about 10 years, I guess. And I haven't been in this industry very long at all. Yeah. Like before this, I worked as a journalist, worked as a bartender. And that was kind of my life. And then started to teach a little bit of meditation, just sort of, I think I'm just very lucky. I got asked to teach. I was in Ireland, in Limerick, and got asked to teach a bunch of men who just recently left prison.
Oh, love that.
And I was incredibly scared to do it. Just scared of being confronted by, just this. I think my fear in that situation was that I have to be 100% real with these people. I cannot be fluffy. I cannot perform. I have to be like so authentic because they're so authentic. And after that experience, it was so touching for me. I just fell in love with this group of men. And after that experience, I just thought, this is what I want to do. And I recognized that there was an awful lot of shame, Sinead. It's really interesting. I wasn't allowing myself to become a meditation teacher. It was very funny. I would teach all my friends to meditate, but there was a part of me that was like, Conor, you're Irish, you're a lad. You can't teach meditation. You know what I mean? You're not the right person to do that. And I recognized that. I was like, oh God, I'm going to have to like, just like shut the fuck up and do this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have to do it. And I remember like my first time ever, like posting a video on Instagram, where I spoke to camera, and I uploaded it and then went and hid under the sheets for a day. I think I went to delete it about 10 times and didn't. And not that anybody even looked at it, you know what I mean? It really wasn't a big deal, but there was a big part of me that was just not giving myself permission to do this.
I think as well, it's because you don't think I think there's always this imposter syndrome. Like even for
Oh,
me, when I started meditating or like teaching, I taught for I did women's circles all around Ireland ballet, and did every single one I did. All the money went to charity. I just didn't feel like I deserved to be paid for it as
yeah,
well because I felt shame.
yeah.
And it was, but to be fair, I think those times where I did all that stuff for free and for charity, I just feel like it top like their feedback. I was like, I can't keep this for me anymore. I have to like
Mm,
tell the world. And I just like thank them for their feedback to those people that came to my women's circles. And because without them, I think I just would have still stuck there. But I'd say yours was probably worse as well because you're 10 years ago. So when I started doing meditating, I probably was the first. I don't know. Like I feel like I changed medicine about 4 years ago. So I became a teacher like 4 years ago. And it didn't seem, for me, it didn't seem as bad, but also I was living in Bali and Thailand where it's really, and I didn't notice that it was kind of like a taboo subject here. It wasn't seem like, oh, look at her sitting down with her eyes closed in the field. I thought it was quite normal. But then when I did a retreat there recently, people are saying that their loved ones were saying like, where are you going to, you know what I mean, to this retreat? It's like, are you okay?
like you're going to rehab or something.
Yeah. So, and for you, this is 10 years ago. So like what was it like then to, I suppose maybe you were around people that already did it. Why I think I was probably like the only one of my friends that did
I
that.
rem- I remember it being very weird. So I used to play in a football team,
Okay.
and that was like I remember I quit the football team because I was just I just had the sense I was like I can't talk to these guys about anything. I remember like going to training one night. I just broken up with a fiance the day before, and I was in absolute bits. And just going to play football and being kind of screamed at by other lads, and just not thinking like I was like I want to cry and I want to have a hug, and I'm not going to get it from anyone here. And that's when I started like my first like men's circle.
Mm-hmm.
And even that, I remember a friend of mine had a flower shop, and she let me borrow her flower shop. And the first night we were like three men just in a little circle, and we didn't really know what to talk about. We were eating biscuits and drinking tea. But it sort of, and it just felt very weird whenever I'd post about it online.
Yeah.
I just go like, oh, cringe. This is really hard. And now, I mean, everyone seems to be in men's circles. Everyone seems to be talking about mindfulness and all of this. It's way, way different.
It's amazing. Like everyone is so into it and
Mm,
recognizing that their nervous systems are bloody shot because it's too hard to get away without meditating. I think like it has to come to blows because
yeah,
there's too much going on. There's too much distraction, and you get to burnout. You get to the stage where you're not sleeping, you are self sabotaging, and there is only one way out, and it is like to sort out that nervous system because
yes,
you're getting sick all the time. A lot of people will come to me like being sick all the time, not sleeping.
yeah,
And, it's not like back in the old days where you came home and you sat down and you just connected to people. Like it's different. Your granny and granddad, they didn't have a TV and they didn't have the stuff. They actually meditated by just sitting
yeah,
there. Whereas
yeah.
we need to actively meditate because we are so distracted and we
Mm,
need to de-excite the nervous system. They would go to work and then come home and take their bits off and sit down, take a cup
yeah,
of tea. Like, we
yeah.
can't do that. We have to actively sit down and take a breath. Like,
So true. Modern life is absolutely brutal and it's destroying us. It really is. I mean, I work so much with kind of these beautiful young minds who are just being driven by this sense that they have to be perfect. And perfection is just another form of self-loathing. It's horrible. There's no such thing as perfect. And perfect is kind of I mean, if we want to talk about perfect, I think we can say that we're all perfect already. It's just our relationship to ourselves is the thing that's a bit messed up.
yeah, I love that one. You were born enough, and you
Mm,
always thought you were enough when you came out, and then like conditions came in, and parents and school and trying to fit in and trying to be cool made us feel like we're not enough. And
yeah,
then that's what we have to get back to. We have to get back to that moment where we felt enough.
yeah,
And sometimes you can, and that's the thing about meditating as well. Like there's just moments where you're just meditating and there's just this inner peace, and it takes a while to get to that. So if you're if you haven't felt that, like it does take a while, and there's just this
Mhm.
feeling of like everything is okay. And that's why I want to push it so much that, you know, you have the answers within you.
Yeah, and I think Sinead, like it's really useful to just begin to sort of get curious about this idea that we're not these little bodies. We're not this cluster of thoughts. We're not these kind of transient feelings and emotions. We're actually something so much bigger and so much more mysterious than that. And what that is, by connecting to this idea that what we are, or that we are something that's so much bigger than our little human experience, and that we're connected to this energy that knows exactly where we've been and what we're doing and has nothing but love for us. I think that's phenomenal. Like Terence McKenna used to always say this thing that nature loves courage, and we are nature. And whenever we start to take risks, whenever we kind of go beyond the fear, whenever we begin to kind of like love ourselves radically, like beautiful things happen in our lives. You ended up in Bali. You know what I mean? You got there through love, right? Like I've got a book. I got there through love too. This is how you kind of create magic in your life, is by really, really loving yourself.
Yeah, I definitely think when you're aligned, when you do everything, I always say I would call it like my higher self. So
Yeah.
if I've been in my higher self today, the universe always gives me what is in line for me. But when I'm stressed out and I'm self sabotaging and I'm being mean to myself, I feel like the universe just keeps giving me shit. So I have to take time out and align myself with meditation, reading, and connecting with
Mm,
other human beings. Like I feel like and it's sometimes it's just as simple as that, like just aligning with yourself with what
yeah.
you enjoy. But I think that's the thing as well. People don't know what they enjoy
Yeah.
because they're
Because,
told to what
yeah.
enjoy.
Yeah. But it's also because we repress our desires, you know?
Yeah.
This is something that we do. We kind of, it's amazing. You talk to so many people, right? And they're all creative as kids.
Mm-hmm.
Every kid is an artist. And then at a certain stage in your life, you begin to, somebody tells you something, like, what are you painting for? What are you drawing for? What are you doing something silly for? And they knock that creativity out of us. They knock the joy out of us. And that's why it's so hard. Like, when you meet someone and they're in a distressed state, they feel like they're stagnating, and you try and remind them, you say like, hey, what brings you joy? And they don't know because they've just repressed it for so long. I think it's so important and so useful to just become aware and write down, like, what are the things that
Yeah.
bring me joy, and how can I really bring them into my life on a more regular basis?
It's mad when you start to bring awareness into what's bringing you joy. Like I have a meditation called Follow and Joy, and it's mad what people come up with because there's like different sections. So I would say like in your career, what moments brought you joy?
Yeah.
Um, and like people have all these random thoughts, and some people are like, I have no things in my career that bring me joy, and I'm like, well, there's your answer. And
Yeah.
even in
Put yourself.
relationships, when I'm like, what brings you joy within your relationship? And it's mostly the times where you're actually having playful fun and
Yeah.
you're up speaking all night and you're talking and you're doing having experiences together. So instead of sitting all day on your phone and sitting watching TV, you're like, okay, no, I actually know what brings me joy in this relationship, and it's playful new experiences and connecting. So you can really put goals into place then,
Mm-hmm.
for those moments to happen, because you could sit there all day and complain about your relationship, but those things that bring you joy are not being put into action.
Yeah. And there's another example of a great boundary. Like, can you kind of say to your partner, hey, we need to create time for this.
Yeah, for
We
sure.
we we need space for this to happen.
Yeah. I won't
Yeah.
keep you too long. Three more questions. Okay.
Ah,
What is your meditation routine? Like, what is your type of, obviously there's hundreds of meditations and people have their own ones they like. Do you swap and change? Do you have the same meditation every day? Is it for an hour? Is it for 5 minutes? Or
yeah, I generally meditate for an hour every
Mhm.
morning, and it's sort of, I do Vipassana meditation. So I would follow the breath,
Mhm.
and then would kind of then begin to just scan through the
Scans.
body.
Yeah.
And then normally just towards the end, we'll just have a kind of very open awareness of whatever is there.
Oh, I call it thinkitating. I love that.
It
when
could
you just
take.
yeah, because like when you're finished your focus and then you're like, okay, let me see what happens, and then you just let it flow. I like that.
Yeah.
You said Vipassana there. Can I ask, you've done Vipassana, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
Do you do it every year, or do you do it, is it like once?
Every year.
Oh, do you do it in Ireland?
I have done it in Ireland, yeah. But I try and like I like to go abroad and do it. I sometimes find doing
Yeah.
it in Ireland is a little bit too close to the old trauma
Yeah.
trigger.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So like if I can go to like I've done it like in Australia and in India and the States a few times and stuff like that. I try and go different places.
If anyone doesn't know what Vipassana is, um, it's 12 hours a day, is it? No, it's about nine. It's what?
It can be more than 12.
Yeah, it's basically meditating for 10 days
Yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah. Even like it gets to the stage too. So I mean, like of course, like the first time you do it, you won't meditate that much. Like you'll probably spend an awful lot more time just walking around in circles going, what am I doing here?
Yeah, yeah.
But as you do it a little bit longer, you tend to kind of just try and almost meditate nonstop.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. You're hearing me now. I
Yeah.
haven't done it. I've done a silent retreat. So I did that was 4 days, and it was like you were meditating 8 hours a day, 7.5, 8 hours. And I thought I was literally dreading it. I was like, oh my God, this last 4 days is gonna be the worst. Fucking loved it. I just buzzed off it, and I came out of it so proud of myself. And I was like, I can't believe I did that. And people are probably listening to
You
this
should be
going,
proud of
that's
yourself.
not wise. Huh?
You should be proud of yourself. It's hard. It's very hard to do these things.
Yeah, but like I was in a retreat for like a month, and then we did the 4 days. So I think I trained my mind right up until that point. So I think I had, but I'm definitely gonna try it because there's one in Ireland as well, but I'll probably will do it in Australia or something. So I was just gonna ask you, can you give me something? I usually ask these questions at the end of the podcast, so it's usually something you like about yourself.
Oh, something I like about myself. I really like how I am with strangers.
Yeah, I like that too.
I really like how I am when I'm meeting someone for the first time.
I love that answer.
Yeah.
I'm like that too. I'm literally like, I will speak to anyone, or I'll find something that they're wearing. I'll be like, oh, that's lovely. And then just start a
Yeah.
conversation.
And
Yeah.
I love to like I've had this since I was a kid. I've always had a sort of a sixth sense for someone who's maybe uncomfortable in a room.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to be able to like, if you're at an event or something and I sense somebody like that and be able to be like, hey, how are you? And
Yeah.
go talk to that person. I like
Oh,
that as well.
love that answer. Okay. And then the last question is, give us a little goal for the next year. Like, what do you want to achieve?
Oh, that's really nice. I think, well, recently I just had this idea and I was like, I know that shame has sort of placed a little bit of a kind of a glass ceiling around me.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's made me often feel like, oh, I could never be on TV or I could never be there because I don't have that kind of education or I could never write that kind of book because I'm not an intellectual person. There's this kind of like little blockage around me. And I've recently begun to really recognize, I thought I'd kind of broken through one shame ceiling, and now I've recognized there's another one. So I want to smash it to pieces. I kind of want to see how big this can go. Do
I
you know what I
love
mean?
that. I feel like I'm the exact same. I have that shame as well. And I have so much information in me and I can't share it because
Ah,
I feel like that too. I feel like I'm so knowledgeable in so many different parts, but I'm like, I can't share it because I'm not a therapist or I'm not such and such. So I decided I'm going to do my psychotherapy, but is that it winning? That's the question.
I mean, I don't know. It's like, first off, I think like Sinead, do you think you can help people with what's inside your head?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Let us.
Especially when I'm in person with people, I just feel like I definitely feel like, and even when people are talking about their problems, I'm like, let me help you with this information. But sometimes I just kind of sit back because I feel the same, I think, with you.
Yeah, but I think as well, like when you recognize that these things are like we all have this, you know what I mean? We
Mhm.
all have the capacity, like the intuitive capacity to like heal each other. We're deeply, deeply interconnected. I think when we all die and we're up in that waiting room between lives, we realize, oh, we were all the same person anyway.
Yeah.
But I think until then, we get this sense. You're talking to somebody, you're like, oh, this is happening for you. I can feel it inside me,
Hmm.
and I would like to help you, or something like that. And I think that's really I think that's very much part of our future. I read this beautiful quote, and it was like, the 21st century, I wish I could remember who said it because it's unfair to quote someone and not say their name, but it was the 21st century will either be spiritual or it won't be at all. Mm-hmm. So I think we're at this stage, right, where we either have to get like radically much more spiritual or we all die. So waiting around to get like validation and sort of these authorities saying, okay, now you can use this language and stuff like this is ridiculous. Your heart is your greatest authority. Your heart is your certificate on the wall. And if you can work on that, I think the world needs to hear more of you, Sinead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Definitely.
Maybe one day we'll meet each other at a Vipassana. We'll do a retreat.
We won't talk.
I won't talk. Not let talk. But well, thank you so much for coming on. It was so amazing to talk to you and nice to get a mail on talking about meditation. And so thank you so much for coming. Where can we find you and where can we find your book?
Yeah, so the book is called The Truth About Love. You can find that in bookshops or you can find it online. I am mostly on Instagram. I think that's probably the best place to find me. Conor Creighton is my name. I'm starting a podcast next month, actually called The Truth About Love.
Love that.
So stay in touch for that.
Amazing.
That's it. Courses, whatever.
Well, thank you so much. And hope everything goes well for you and hope you can break through that shame as well. And thanks to everyone listening here today and hope you can subscribe and leave us a little review.